She had always loved the piano. From the first moment she touched the keys, something inside her came alive. The sound, the rhythm, the way music seemed to flow from her fingers made her feel whole. She spent every free moment at the small piano in her home, practicing scales, experimenting with melodies, and learning songs by ear. Her neighbors often heard the soft, tentative notes turning into strong, confident music as the days passed. Growing up in a modest neighborhood, she did not have access to the best instruments or expensive lessons. She learned from books, online videos, and sometimes a kind teacher who agreed to help her for little pay. Her parents supported her as much as they could, but life was busy, and resources were limited. Still, she never complained. For her, music was not a hobby. It was a lifeline. Her days were filled with routine and discipline. Before school, she practiced for an hour, returning home with notebooks full of sheet music and ideas. In the evenings, she performed for anyone who would listen, often her younger siblings or friends who came by. She was determined to improve, to someday be recognized for her talent. But despite her efforts, there was always a lingering worry. Was she really good enough? She heard stories of famous pianists who could make audiences weep with a single song, and she dreamed of being like them. Among all the names she admired, one stood out. The famous pianist had a reputation for brilliance and harsh standards. People said this musician could see a player's soul in a performance, and the thought of being noticed by such a person both excited and terrified her. School life was not easy. She had to balance classes, homework, and practice, and sometimes she felt like no one understood the world she lived in. Friends invited her out, but she often refused, saying she had to practice. They didn't complain much, but she sometimes wondered if she was missing out. Yet, the pull of the piano was stronger than any social gathering. There were moments of doubt. She would stumble on a difficult passage or feel her fingers slip, and the thought of failure would creep in. Sometimes, she even considered quitting, imagining a life where she was just ordinary, not remarkable. But every time she faced this thought, she returned to the piano. The music called her back, stronger than her fear. Her parents noticed her struggle. They reminded her that talent alone was not enough, that persistence and patience mattered most. They told her stories of people who had faced rejection but had gone on to achieve great things. She listened but still feared that her own chances might slip away unnoticed. Then came the news she had been waiting for. The famous pianist was organizing a small audition for young musicians. Only a few would be selected, and the opportunity to be seen by such a master could change her life. She felt a mix of excitement and fear. What if she failed? What if she was not good enough? She threw herself into preparation. Each day, she practiced for hours, repeating the same difficult pieces until her fingers ached. She studied the famous pianist's performances, trying to understand what made them so captivating. She worked not only on technique but on expression, learning to convey emotion through every note. Her room became a sanctuary of sound, a place where she poured all her hopes and fears. Friends and family watched her transformation with awe. Her confidence grew, and even though she was nervous, there was a new determination in her eyes. She knew that this audition could be the turning point, but she also knew that it could end in disappointment. Still, she believed in her talent, and more importantly, in the music that lived inside her. The day of the audition arrived. She wore her favorite outfit, one that made her feel both comfortable and confident. Her hands trembled slightly as she walked into the room, carrying her sheet music and the weight of her dreams. The room was filled with other hopeful musicians, each one talented and nervous. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. When it was her turn, she approached the piano, feeling the familiar texture of the keys under her fingers. The famous pianist sat in the front, eyes focused, expression unreadable. She began to play. The first notes were careful, precise, but soon, the music flowed freely, each note carrying the story she wanted to tell. She lost herself in the melody, forgetting everything else, imagining only the sound and the emotion it carried. The performance lasted longer than she realized. She felt exhausted, exhilarated, and nervous all at once. As she finished, there was a pause. The famous pianist remained silent, watching, as if measuring every nuance. Her heart pounded. Had it been enough? Would this be the moment she had dreamed of? Or had her hopes been in vain? Then came the verdict. The famous pianist spoke, not with warmth, but with a measured tone. The words stung. She had not been selected. The rejection felt heavier than she had imagined. All the hours of practice, the sacrifices, the dreams, they seemed to vanish in a single moment. She tried to hide her disappointment, but tears threatened to spill, and she felt the familiar pang of doubt creep in. She left the audition room quietly, the applause and chatter of others fading around her. On the way home, she thought about everything she had done, wondering if it had been worth it. The familiar streets of her neighborhood seemed smaller, less welcoming, and for the first time, she questioned her path. Had she pushed too hard? Was her dream unattainable? At home, her parents waited, sensing her disappointment. They did not offer empty comfort but reminded her of her progress, of the courage it took to reach this stage. They spoke of failure not as an end but as a lesson, a stepping stone to something greater. Slowly, she began to see that their words held truth. This rejection, painful as it was, did not define her. Her love for music, her dedication, and her talent remained intact. That night, she returned to her piano. The keys felt different somehow, not as a challenge but as a friend. She played not to impress anyone, not to earn approval, but simply to express herself. The music filled the room, soft and clear, carrying her emotions, her frustrations, and her hope. And in that moment, she realized something important. Rejection was not the end. It was a part of the journey. As she practiced, ideas for new compositions began to form in her mind. She thought about how she could make her music unique, how she could tell her own story through the piano. The disappointment of the audition transformed into motivation. She would work harder, play with more feeling, and create music that was entirely her own. The famous pianist's rejection, painful as it had been, sparked a new determination. She knew the road ahead would not be easy. There would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, and perhaps more rejection. But for the first time, she felt ready to face them, armed with the knowledge that her worth was not measured by the approval of others, but by the passion and sincerity she poured into her music. The following days were filled with renewed focus. She experimented with melodies, mixing the technical skills she had learned with the emotions she felt. Her music began to take on a new depth, a sense of individuality that had been missing before. She shared her pieces with friends and family, who were amazed at the change. She felt proud, not because someone else recognized her, but because she had discovered something new about herself. Her dream of being noticed by the famous pianist still lingered, but it no longer consumed her. She realized that the path to success was not a straight line, and that setbacks could lead to growth. Each note she played became a statement of resilience, each practice session a step toward her own vision. The music was no longer just about impressing others. It was about telling her story, and that made it more powerful than anything she had played before. And so, she continued, day after day, hour after hour, learning not only about music but about herself. The journey had only just begun, and though the first step had ended in rejection, it had also planted the seeds of determination and creativity that would guide her for years to come. She would not let a single disappointment define her future. The piano, her companion, and her passion would lead the way, and she was ready to follow wherever it might take her. The days after the audition were heavy with silence. She went about her routine, attending school and helping around the house, but a shadow hung over her spirit. Every time she passed the piano, she felt a mix of longing and fear. The memory of the famous pianist's calm, unreadable expression haunted her. She wondered if she had played badly, if she had failed to reach the level she had imagined. Her friends tried to cheer her up, saying she had done her best, and that the pianist was probably too strict for anyone to impress easily. But she knew deep down that this rejection felt different. It was not just a critique. It felt personal, as though the one person she had idolized had silently declared that she was not enough. She kept replaying the performance in her mind, searching for mistakes, trying to figure out what she could have done differently. Her parents noticed the weight on her shoulders. One evening, her mother sat beside her at the piano and said softly, "You gave everything you had, and that is what matters. Some doors close, but others will open. You are still the same talented girl who loves to play." She nodded, but the reassurance did not reach the deepest part of her doubt. She loved music, but love alone could not erase the sting of failure. At school, she avoided talking about the audition. She felt exposed, as if everyone knew she had tried and failed. In class, her thoughts wandered to melodies she could have played differently, harmonies she could have made richer. Her notebook was filled with sketches of new compositions, notes written in haste, some scribbled in frustration. Music was still her companion, but it was no longer a source of joy. It was a reminder of what she had not achieved. She spent long hours at the piano, playing pieces she had loved for years, trying to recapture the feeling of confidence she had once felt. But every note seemed to fall short, and she grew frustrated. Sometimes she slammed her hands down in anger, tears welling in her eyes. The piano had always been a place of solace, but now it reflected her fear of inadequacy. She questioned whether her dream of being recognized would ever come true. One afternoon, while wandering through her neighborhood, she stumbled upon a small music shop. The windows displayed a collection of old instruments, sheet music stacked neatly, and posters of performers who had once passed through the shop's doors. Curiosity led her inside. The owner, an elderly man with kind eyes, noticed her hesitation and smiled. "Looking for something special?" he asked. She nodded, feeling a little embarrassed to explain. She told him about the audition, about her disappointment, and about her fear that she was not good enough. The man listened patiently, then guided her to a corner of the shop where an old upright piano stood. It was worn, its wood scratched and faded, but he encouraged her to play. She hesitated, but when her fingers touched the keys, a familiar warmth returned. The piano had a voice of its own, imperfect but honest. She played for hours, letting her emotions flow freely without worrying about technique or judgment. The experience at the music shop rekindled a spark within her. She realized that music was not just about impressing others. It was about expression, about telling her story through sound. She returned home that evening with a renewed sense of purpose. The rejection still hurt, but it no longer defined her. She could grow, experiment, and find her own path, even if it diverged from the expectations of the famous pianist. Her next days were filled with experimentation. She explored different genres, blending classical pieces with her own compositions, adding twists that reflected her feelings. Some melodies felt clumsy, others surprisingly moving. She recorded herself on a small phone recorder, listening carefully to what worked and what needed refinement. Each session taught her something new. Slowly, her music began to reflect a maturity and depth that she had not realized she possessed. Her friends began to notice a change in her. She was quieter, more introspective, but there was a light in her eyes when she spoke about music. She shared her compositions with them cautiously, unsure of how they would respond. To her relief, they were impressed, not because of technical perfection, but because the music carried genuine emotion. That encouragement mattered more than any praise from the world-famous pianist. She also started performing in small local venues, places where people appreciated live music but did not judge harshly. Coffee shops, school events, and community centers became stages where she could try her new pieces. Each performance, small as it was, built her confidence. She learned to enjoy the act of playing for others again, without the weight of expectation crushing her. Meanwhile, she kept the famous pianist in her thoughts, not as a source of fear, but as a distant figure whose judgment had inadvertently pushed her toward growth. She realized that rejection, though painful, had forced her to confront her weaknesses and explore her own creativity. The setback had redirected her energy, teaching her resilience and independence. She spent nights composing a particular piece that became her obsession. It was different from anything she had attempted before. Complex, emotional, and deeply personal. She poured all her feelings into it. Frustration, hope, sadness, and determination. The piece was not meant for anyone's approval. It was an honest expression of herself, the culmination of years of practice, failure, and reflection. One evening, after completing the composition, she played it slowly at the piano, letting each note resonate in the quiet room. She closed her eyes, feeling a sense of release she had never experienced before. This was not just music. It was a statement of her journey, a testament to her perseverance. For the first time, she felt a profound connection to her art, untainted by the fear of rejection. Encouraged by this breakthrough, she decided to share the piece online. She recorded herself with simple equipment, careful to capture the emotion of her performance rather than technical perfection. She uploaded the video to a small platform for aspiring musicians, uncertain of how it would be received. Days passed, and she watched the views slowly climb. Comments began to appear, expressing admiration for her talent and the emotion in her playing. She felt a mixture of surprise and pride, realizing that her music had touched others even without the endorsement of the famous pianist. The growing response motivated her to continue sharing more of her compositions. She started a routine of recording and posting new pieces, experimenting with different styles and narratives. Each video was a chance to connect with an audience that appreciated her authenticity, and with each upload, her confidence grew. She began to see that recognition was not only about fame or approval from a single person. It could be found in the hearts of those who truly understood her music. Months passed, and her following expanded. People from different cities and even countries started reaching out, inspired by her story of persistence and passion. Some messages were short but heartfelt, others detailed, sharing how her music had helped them through difficult times. She read each one carefully, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Her journey was no longer solitary. Her music had become a bridge connecting her to others. She also began teaching younger students in her neighborhood, sharing the techniques and lessons she had learned through her own struggles. Teaching gave her another perspective on her music, forcing her to articulate her understanding and inspire others. Watching her students grow and succeed reminded her of her own journey and reinforced her commitment to continue developing her skills. Through this period of growth and exploration, she maintained the memory of the famous pianist's rejection, not as a wound, but as a catalyst for self-discovery. She realized that the initial disappointment had pushed her to find her unique voice, to explore creativity beyond imitation, and to build a community around her music. What had once felt like a door closed forever now seemed like the starting point of a path she was meant to walk. By the end of the year, she had composed several original pieces that she considered her best work yet. She performed them at local events, online, and for friends and family. Each performance brought a sense of accomplishment and pride that she had never known before. She understood that the journey was as important as the destination, and that rejection was just one step along the way, shaping her resilience and artistry. She often reflected on her progress while sitting at the piano late at night. The memory of the famous pianist's expression no longer caused anxiety but inspired determination. She knew that the road ahead would still hold challenges, but she also knew that she had discovered something essential. Her music was powerful, not because of approval, but because it was honest, passionate, and uniquely hers. And that realization was more valuable than any recognition she could have sought at the audition. She woke up that morning with a quiet determination that she had not felt in months. The rejection from the famous pianist still lingered, but it no longer felt like a wall closing in. Instead, it was a challenge, a puzzle she had to solve for herself. She moved to the piano, hands hovering over the keys, and began to play. The familiar melodies flowed, but soon she felt a desire to go beyond what she knew. She wanted to create something different, something entirely her own. She started experimenting with her music in ways she had never tried before. She combined classical techniques with rhythms she had heard in street music, blending harmony and dissonance to see what would emerge. Some attempts were chaotic, some beautiful, and some made her laugh at how clumsy they sounded. But she realized that mistakes were not failures. They were guides, showing her paths she had not considered. With each attempt, she felt closer to discovering her true voice. Her room became a workshop of sound. Sheets of music were scattered across the floor, notebooks filled with notes and sketches. She would stop in the middle of a piece to try a sudden idea, then start over when it did not work. The process was exhausting but exhilarating. She felt alive in a way she had never felt when only practicing to perfection. Music became not just an art to master, but a language to speak her feelings, fears, and dreams. She began to notice changes in herself outside the piano as well. Where she had once been hesitant and self-doubting, she now carried herself with quiet confidence. She spoke more in class, shared her ideas with friends, and laughed more freely. Even when setbacks occurred, she no longer allowed them to define her. Every challenge was now an opportunity to grow, and the rejection from the pianist had been the spark that ignited this transformation. One day, a mentor from her neighborhood, a retired musician who had once performed in small concert halls, noticed her dedication. He asked to hear what she had been working on, and she played some of her experimental pieces. He listened carefully, nodding and smiling, and then gave her advice. Not instructions to copy, but insights to help her refine her ideas. He encouraged her to embrace her uniqueness, to trust that the music that felt honest to her would resonate with others. This mentorship was gentle, supportive, and for the first time, she felt guidance without pressure. Encouraged by the mentor, she began to structure her compositions more intentionally. She worked on transitions, dynamics, and pacing, balancing emotion with form. Her music became a journey, each piece telling a story that could be felt even without words. She recorded her sessions, listening critically, making adjustments, and sometimes discarding entire sections. Progress was slow, but she felt it deeply, every improvement a testament to her perseverance. As she continued, she also reached out to her growing online audience. People who had followed her after the previous year's recordings sent messages of encouragement, sharing how her music had touched their lives. She read each message carefully, feeling a sense of connection she had never experienced before. These listeners had no personal stake in her success. They were moved purely by the authenticity of her music. That realization filled her with pride and motivation. She began preparing for a small performance at a community event. It was not an audition, and the audience was friendly, but she felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. She wanted to play the new pieces she had been developing, pieces that carried the essence of her journey, including the pain of rejection, the struggle for self-expression, and the joy of discovery. She practiced relentlessly, repeating sections until they conveyed exactly what she intended. When the day of the performance arrived, she felt a thrill of nervousness and anticipation. The small hall was filled with familiar faces, neighbors, and friends, yet it felt large and intimidating. She took a deep breath, adjusted her seating at the piano, and began to play. The opening notes were tentative, but as the music progressed, her confidence grew. She allowed herself to feel every note, to communicate her story, to reach out to the audience without words. The response was immediate. People leaned forward, absorbed by the music. Some closed their eyes, letting themselves be carried by the sound. Others smiled and nodded in appreciation. She felt a warmth spreading through her as the realization struck. She had moved them, not by impressing them with perfection, but by sharing her heart. The performance was not flawless, but it was real, and that authenticity mattered more than any technical accolade. Afterward, people approached her to compliment her work. They asked questions about her compositions, her inspirations, and how she had developed her unique style. She spoke with honesty, describing the journey of struggle, experimentation, and growth. The famous pianist was never mentioned directly, but her story of perseverance shone through. It was clear to her that the path she had taken, though unconventional and difficult, had brought her to a place of genuine connection and fulfillment. The success of this performance ignited a new sense of purpose. She realized that her music could inspire others, that sharing her journey could encourage people who faced similar setbacks. She decided to continue creating and performing, not for fame or recognition, but to communicate, to connect, and to express her evolving self. The community's support became a foundation on which she could build her confidence and skills. She spent the following months writing and refining more pieces, always experimenting, always learning. She explored themes of struggle, hope, love, and loss, drawing from personal experiences and the stories of those around her. Each composition became a reflection of life, a bridge between her inner world and the external world. Her music grew richer, more nuanced, and more powerful with each passing day. One evening, while playing a particularly challenging new piece, she paused and reflected on how far she had come. The rejection that had once felt like the end of the world now seemed like a necessary push that had forced her to find her voice. She had transformed the pain into creativity, frustration into innovation, and doubt into resilience. She understood that her journey was far from over, but she was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. Encouraged by her progress, she decided to enter a regional music competition. It was not as prestigious as the audition with the famous pianist, but it offered a stage and an audience, a chance to share her music and receive honest feedback. She chose her best pieces, the ones that represented her journey and growth, and prepared with dedication and care. Every practice session was a step closer to expressing herself fully, and she embraced the challenge with enthusiasm rather than fear. The day of the competition arrived. She felt the familiar surge of nerves and excitement as she approached the piano. The audience was larger than she expected, filled with other musicians, families, and music lovers. She reminded herself that this was not about impressing anyone, but about sharing her music authentically. She began to play, letting each note convey her journey, her struggles, and her triumphs. As the performance unfolded, she felt a connection with the audience unlike any she had experienced before. Their attention was not critical but empathetic, drawn into the story her music told. The applause at the end was heartfelt and sincere, and she realized that recognition was not always about fame or validation from a single person. It could come from touching the hearts of those who listened with care and attention. This understanding filled her with a profound sense of satisfaction. In the following days, she received messages from other musicians and audience members praising her creativity, expression, and authenticity. These messages were different from previous feedback. They reflected an understanding of her journey, an appreciation for the risks she had taken, and encouragement for the path she had chosen. She felt proud not only of her talent but of the resilience and courage she had shown. Her mentor continued to guide her, offering advice and encouragement while allowing her the freedom to explore her musical identity. She learned to trust her instincts, to listen to her inner voice, and to take risks in her compositions. This mentorship, combined with her own determination, allowed her to grow in ways she had never imagined. She was no longer just a student of music. She was an artist in her own right. She also began to teach others, sharing her experiences and techniques with younger musicians. She emphasized the importance of perseverance, creativity, and self-expression, encouraging them to explore their own unique voices. Watching her students grow and succeed reinforced her understanding that music was a living, evolving journey, and that helping others discover their potential was as rewarding as performing herself. As the months passed, she continued to create, perform, and share her music, always experimenting and learning. She had transformed the rejection she once feared into a powerful motivator, shaping her into a confident, innovative, and expressive musician. She understood that the journey was ongoing, that each performance and composition was a step along a path of growth and self-discovery. And in this realization, she found not only purpose but joy, knowing that her music had the power to touch hearts and inspire others, just as it had carried her through her own challenges. Months passed, and her music continued to evolve. The small performances she had been giving now felt like a warm-up to something bigger, and she sensed that the moment for a breakthrough was approaching. She had grown in confidence, skill, and creativity, and her compositions carried a depth that reflected her journey. Each piece was not just notes on a page, but a story of struggle, discovery, and triumph. One morning, she received an invitation from a local music festival. It was a prestigious event in her region, attended by music enthusiasts, critics, and other talented performers. Her excitement was tempered by nerves. This was not a casual performance. It was a stage where she would be judged, but also where her music could reach a wider audience. She accepted immediately, knowing that this could be the moment that defined the next chapter of her journey. Preparation became intense. She selected the pieces that best represented her growth and practiced them tirelessly. Each note, each pause, each subtle change in tempo was deliberate. She wanted to convey emotion, not just technical skill, and spent hours experimenting with expression, dynamics, and phrasing. Sometimes she played late into the night, her fingers sore but her spirit energized by the process. She was determined to make this performance unforgettable. She also rehearsed in front of a small group of friends and neighbors. Their feedback was encouraging but also honest. They pointed out moments where the emotion could be stronger or transitions could be smoother. She listened carefully, integrating their suggestions without losing the authenticity of her music. The process reminded her that growth came from both self-reflection and input from others, and she felt more prepared than ever. The day of the festival arrived. She entered the hall, its high ceilings and rows of seats intimidating yet inspiring. She could feel the energy of the crowd even before she stepped on stage. Other performers had already captivated the audience, and she wondered if she could make an impact. But she reminded herself that she was not playing to impress anyone but to express herself honestly, and that thought steadied her nerves. When her turn came, she approached the piano with a mix of anticipation and calm. She took a deep breath and began to play. The first notes were deliberate, setting the mood. As she continued, the music flowed effortlessly, carrying the story of her journey from doubt and rejection to growth and self-discovery. Each note resonated with feeling, each phrase a reflection of the struggles she had overcome. The audience seemed to lean in, captivated by the sincerity and depth of her performance. By the middle of the piece, she felt completely immersed. The stage disappeared, leaving only her and the piano. She poured every emotion into the music, the frustration of past failures, the excitement of newfound confidence, and the joy of discovering her own voice. The audience responded subtly at first, with attentive silence, then with murmurs of admiration as they recognized the beauty and complexity of what she was playing. She felt a surge of energy, a confirmation that her music was reaching others as she intended. As the final notes lingered in the hall, there was a moment of profound stillness. Then the applause erupted, spontaneous and heartfelt. She looked up to see the audience on their feet, cheering, clapping, and smiling. It was a moment she would never forget. She felt a mixture of relief, pride, and exhilaration. The recognition she had sought for so long had arrived, not as a distant dream, but as a tangible, shared experience. After the performance, several people approached her to express their admiration. Critics praised her originality and emotional depth. Musicians asked questions about her techniques, and listeners shared how the music had touched them personally. She was overwhelmed but grateful, realizing that her persistence and dedication had borne fruit. The festival became a turning point, a public acknowledgement of the talent she had honed over years of practice, struggle, and self-discovery. Among the crowd, she noticed a familiar figure, someone she had never expected to see. The famous pianist, the very person who had rejected her months ago, had attended the festival. Their expression was unreadable at first, but as they listened to her music, a subtle nod of approval appeared. The recognition in that moment was different from the applause of the audience. It was personal, quiet, and meaningful. She realized that the rejection she had endured had prepared her for this moment, and that her growth had finally earned acknowledgement. After the performance, the famous pianist approached her backstage. Their words were measured but kind, acknowledging her talent, creativity, and resilience. They admitted that the earlier decision had been based on a very narrow assessment of potential, and that her journey since then had proven her capability and uniqueness. She felt a mixture of relief, validation, and humility. The recognition she had longed for had arrived, but it was accompanied by a deeper understanding of her own worth and abilities. The interaction with the famous pianist was brief but impactful. It reinforced a lesson she had learned along the way, that success was not just about meeting someone else's expectations, but about discovering and expressing her own voice. The rejection that had once seemed devastating had been a catalyst for growth, forcing her to innovate, take risks, and develop a depth that might never have emerged otherwise. In the weeks following the festival, she received invitations to perform at other events, both local and regional. Her online following grew as recordings of her performance circulated, attracting attention from music enthusiasts far beyond her community. She continued to create and share new compositions, each piece a reflection of her evolving style and experiences. Her confidence and creativity flourished, and she embraced opportunities with a sense of purpose and joy. She also began mentoring younger musicians, sharing her experiences and insights. She emphasized the importance of perseverance, resilience, and authenticity, encouraging them to explore their own unique voices. Teaching became another avenue for her to grow, as she learned to articulate her understanding of music and inspire others. She found fulfillment not only in her performances but in nurturing the next generation of artists. Despite the recognition and success, she remained grounded. She remembered the early days of struggle, the countless hours of practice, and the sting of rejection. Those memories fueled her humility and commitment to continue learning. She understood that the journey of a musician was ongoing, and that each performance, composition, and challenge was an opportunity to refine her skills and deepen her artistry. Her daily routine continued to revolve around the piano, but now it was infused with purpose and creativity rather than anxiety. She experimented with new genres, collaborated with other musicians, and explored the emotional and technical possibilities of her instrument. Each day brought new discoveries, reinforcing the idea that music was not just a destination, but a lifelong journey of exploration and expression. As she reflected on her path, she realized that the famous pianist's initial rejection had been a turning point, shaping her into a stronger, more inventive, and self-assured musician. The journey had taught her resilience, the importance of self-expression, and the power of perseverance. She understood that setbacks were not endpoints but stepping stones, each one contributing to the growth and depth of her artistry. In quiet moments, she would sit at her piano, replaying the music that had carried her through challenges and triumphs. She felt gratitude for the experiences that had tested her, for the mentors and supporters who had guided her, and for the audiences who had embraced her work. She knew that the road ahead would continue to have obstacles, but she now faced them with confidence, creativity, and a deep love for her craft. The breakthrough she had achieved was not just about recognition or applause. It was about discovering her own voice and sharing it with the world. Each note she played carried the story of her journey, the lessons learned, and the emotions felt along the way. The festival performance had marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where her music could inspire, connect, and touch the hearts of others, just as it had carried her through her own trials and growth. After the festival, her life began to change in ways she had only dreamed of. Invitations to perform came from music events in nearby cities, and recordings of her performances spread across social media, gaining praise from listeners and critics alike. The recognition she had longed for was finally coming, but it was different from what she had imagined. It was not just about fame or accolades. It was about connecting with people through her music, touching hearts, and sharing her story. She spent her days preparing for these new opportunities. Each performance was a chance to refine her skills and explore new expressions. She experimented with compositions, blending classical techniques with personal innovations, and challenged herself to communicate more deeply through her music. Her piano became not just an instrument but a companion, a partner in storytelling, and a tool to convey the complexities of human emotion. One day, she received an unexpected message. The famous pianist who had once rejected her wanted to meet. There was no pressure, only a desire to discuss music and perhaps offer guidance. She felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Memories of the past rejection surfaced, but she had grown since then. She knew that this meeting was not about seeking approval. It was about sharing the music she had developed and the journey she had undertaken. When they met, the pianist listened to her play one of her original compositions. The performance was filled with emotion, technical skill, and personal expression. She played not to impress but to communicate, and the effect was immediate. The pianist nodded several times, eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and acknowledgement. Afterward, they spoke about music, technique, and creativity, offering insights and encouragement. She felt seen in a way that transcended any previous evaluation. The rejection had become a distant memory, replaced by respect and recognition. This encounter reinforced her understanding of her own value. Success was not defined by the opinions of others, but by the dedication, passion, and authenticity she poured into her art. She realized that the journey, with all its struggles and setbacks, had shaped her into a musician capable of creating something truly meaningful. The famous pianist's acknowledgement was gratifying, but the true reward lay in her growth and self-discovery. She continued performing at various events, each audience responding with appreciation and genuine interest. Critics praised her originality and emotional depth, and her online following expanded steadily. Messages poured in from listeners who shared how her music had moved them, inspired them, or helped them through difficult times. Each message strengthened her belief in the power of music and reinforced her commitment to share it with the world. Teaching became another important part of her life. She mentored young musicians in her community, sharing not only techniques but also lessons from her journey. She encouraged them to embrace mistakes as opportunities for growth, to find their unique voices, and to persevere despite setbacks. Watching her students' progress was deeply rewarding, reminding her of her own journey and the resilience required to pursue a dream. Despite the growing recognition and opportunities, she remained humble. She never forgot the early days of struggle, the countless hours of practice, and the sting of rejection. Those experiences had been essential to her development, shaping her into a musician with depth, creativity, and resilience. She understood that the path of an artist was ongoing, requiring constant learning, experimentation, and self-reflection. Her compositions grew richer and more complex, reflecting her understanding of music and human emotion. She explored themes of love, loss, hope, and triumph, creating pieces that resonated with a wide range of listeners. Each new work was a reflection of her experiences, a narrative told through melody, harmony, and rhythm. Audiences responded to the sincerity and passion of her performances, recognizing that her music was born from genuine expression rather than the pursuit of approval. Over time, she began collaborating with other musicians, exploring new genres and styles. These collaborations challenged her to adapt, learn, and expand her musical horizons. She found joy in creating something collectively, blending her voice with others to produce unique and inspiring performances. Each collaboration was a lesson in communication, flexibility, and creativity, further enriching her growth as an artist. Her journey also taught her the importance of resilience and perseverance. She knew that not every opportunity would lead to immediate success, and setbacks would continue to occur. But she had learned to view challenges as opportunities for growth, to transform disappointment into motivation, and to maintain focus on her own artistic development. This mindset allowed her to navigate her career with confidence and purpose. One evening, after a particularly moving performance, she sat at the piano alone in her room. The applause from the audience still echoed in her mind, but she was focused on the music itself. She played a piece that had taken months to perfect, letting each note convey the depth of her experiences. As the final chord resonated, she felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had achieved something far greater than recognition. She had discovered her own voice and learned to express it fully. Her story began to inspire others. Young musicians reached out, seeking advice and sharing their struggles. They were drawn to her authenticity, resilience, and dedication. She realized that her journey had created a ripple effect, motivating others to pursue their passions despite obstacles. This realization filled her with gratitude and reinforced her commitment to continue growing and sharing her music. She also took time to reflect on the role of the famous pianist in her journey. The rejection that had once felt devastating had been a catalyst for growth, pushing her to explore her creativity, develop resilience, and discover her unique voice. The acknowledgement she later received was meaningful, but the real value lay in the lessons learned and the transformation that had occurred within her. She understood that setbacks were not endpoints but opportunities to evolve and refine one's craft. As her career progressed, she remained focused on the essence of her music, authentic expression, emotional depth, and connection with listeners. She sought to create experiences that transcended technical skill, aiming to touch hearts and inspire reflection. Her performances became known not only for their precision but for the sincerity and humanity they conveyed. She also dedicated herself to continuous learning, exploring new techniques, studying different styles, and pushing the boundaries of her own abilities. Each challenge was embraced as an opportunity to grow, and each success was a step toward deeper understanding and mastery. The journey of a musician, she realized, was lifelong, and every experience contributed to the richness of her artistry. Throughout it all, she maintained a sense of balance and humility. She celebrated achievements without becoming complacent and viewed challenges as part of the ongoing process of growth. Her passion for music remained the central driving force in her life, guiding her decisions, inspiring creativity, and shaping her relationships with audiences, peers, and students. Eventually, she began to compose pieces specifically intended to share her story, the journey from rejection to recognition, struggle to fulfillment. These works resonated deeply with audiences, who recognized the authenticity and emotional truth within them. She felt a profound sense of purpose, knowing that her music could communicate experiences and emotions that words alone often could not. As time went on, she continued to perform, compose, and mentor, building a career that reflected her values, creativity, and resilience. The early rejection that had once felt like a barrier had become a defining moment, shaping her into the musician she had become. She had learned that true success was measured not by the approval of others, but by dedication, authenticity, and the impact one's art could have on the world. In quiet moments, she would return to the piano, not for performance or recognition, but for the love of music itself. The keys beneath her fingers were a constant reminder of the journey she had undertaken, the challenges, the growth, the breakthroughs, and the triumphs. Each note was a celebration of perseverance, each melody a testament to the power of passion and dedication. Her story became a source of inspiration for many, a reminder that setbacks do not define the future, and that one song, one performance, or one moment of dedication can transform a life. She had moved from rejection to recognition, from doubt to self-assurance, and from aspiration to accomplishment. And through it all, her music had remained the heart of her journey, carrying her forward and touching the lives of those who listened.